Hey YouTube, Kirswick here, bringing you all an update to my Predaplant Yugioh deck profile for November 2024. Wanted to update the Predaplant deck. I always like to update the different Yugioh dimension characters and their 4 different decks. They're some of my favorites from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 series. I've always been able to keep each one of their decks, Speedroids, Phantom Knights, Performer Pals, and Predaplants, just because I really like the playstyle of all 4 of the decks. So I figured it's been over a year since the last update for Predaplants, and I'd give you all an update with some of the changes made. I'm still very surprised that we have super polymerization at full power since the last update to this deck, so we'll enjoy it to the full extent that we can make use of for this fusion focused deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the Pendulum Predaplant monsters that we run in the deck. We're running 3 copies of Predaplant Yugioh. During the main phase for its Pendulum effect, you can fusion summon 1 Dark Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. You can use this effect of Yugioh once per turn, and if it's sent to the graveyard or added to your extra deck face up because it was used for fusion material, you can add 1 face up Dark Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, just giving you back those resources to use as well. But it's good for the scale 0 option as well, so then you can Pendulum summon out your level 1 Predaplant monsters to the field as well, because one of our main fusion monsters, which is Starving Venom Fusion Dragons, needs 2 dark monsters on the field except for tokens, so you can't just use polymerization and the cards in your hand to be able to make that monster. We're also running the 2 copies of Predaplant Triantis. With this card, while it's in your Pendulum Zone, you can fusion summon a Dark Fusion monster. You can also use cards in your Pendulum Zone as monsters on the field as fusion materials for them. So if you have the Fulakula in the other Pendulum scale and your Triantis, you can then use the fusion effect of the Fulakula to fuse Triantis and Fulakula together to be able to create your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. And then added to the extra deck, you can use Fulakula to add that other resource that was also sent to the extra deck face up for an add back to your hand. If it's sent to the graveyard or add to your extra deck face up because it was used as fusion material, you can choose monsters in the field up to the number of monsters you control and place 1 predator counter on each one, and then making the standard effect for the predator counter monsters to make them level 2 or higher become level 1 as long as they have that predator counter, which is a big focus for a lot of the summons that we'll do in the deck regarding the Predaplant monsters. But before we get to the main deck, non-pendulum effect monsters, the other pendulum Predaplant card we use is Predaplant Spider Orchid with another scale 8 during your main phase. The turn this card is activated this turn. You can target 1 other face-up card in the spell and trap card zone, destroy it. You can use this effect of Spider Orchid once per turn. A little more back row destruction with this card for some pesky face-up cards, and during the end phase of this card was no more special summon this turn. You can discard 1 plant monster to add 1 level 4 lower plant monster from your deck to your hand. More search power and another level 1, which could potentially be pendulum summon off of your pendulum scales, including Bafilakula on the field. For the non-pendulum Predaplants, another reason that also made me want to update the Predaplant deck was the inclusion of Orpheus Scorpio in the Megatin. I need 1 more copy of the beautiful QCRs for this card in the deck. With it, if it's no more special summon, you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for Orpheus Scorpio. You can only use this effect once per turn, but the main grab off of Orpheus Scorpio is our once per turn, or once per duel, not once per turn, Darling Tanya Cobra, because it can add a polymerization spell or a fusion spell from our deck to our hand. So very, very useful for that search power that this card can provide. And then Orpheus Scorpio just giving us more and more of the resources. This deck still does have a card on the ban list in the form of Vert Anaconda, so we can't fully make use of the link plays in this deck, but still, fusion power is what this deck focuses on entirely. We also run the 3 copies of Predaplant Bibelisp. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except for Biblist. And if this card with a monster with a predator counters on the field, you can special summon this card from your graveyard but banish it when it leaves the field. So it's just more of a resource grab as well to add back from the graveyard to your field, because other Predaplant monsters as well that you summon in the deck may need a fusion monster for that resource, like when we summon out our Predaplant Dragostapelia to the field, needing a fusion monster and a dark monster. So then we just have that resource that Biblist can provide, summoning back onto the field after we use it it for a fusion play. We're also running for the last of the 3-ofs, 3 copies of Clemence Undo. Now, with the use of Predator counters, it's kind of like a makeshift super polymerization, because monsters with a Predator counter that uses fusion material are treated as dark, and during your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using this card on the field, and monsters from your hand field, and or monsters with a Predator counter your opponent controls as fusion material. So, once again, using your opponent's resource as one of your own, as long as it has that Predator counter, which they can be also placed with cards like our Predaplant Triantis also. Some other cards that can provide Predaplant counters that are not spells are the Spinodenia. When it's normal or special summon, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and place a Predator counter on it. And if it's level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1, as long as it has that counter. And if it battles a monster that has a level, you can special summon a Predaplant for monster from your deck, except for a Spinodenia. So then just more resource grab, but I like this as a potential normal summon target on the field as well to use. With the lower numbers also being 2 Serancion. It's a special summon resource when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack. Being able to then have this card be special summoned out. If it's destroyed by an opponent's monster, you can special summon or add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for Serancion. So more search for all the other Predaplants that we also just, noticed with the other cards in the deck. And lastly, the 1 copy of Darling Tanya Cobra. It's our go-to search target with our or for Scorpio, and it's a once per duel effect. That's why we're only running the 1 copy. For the rest of the main deck monsters, 3 copies of Lonefire Blossom. This card's just way too good not to run in the deck because it can grab any of our Predaplant monsters. Summoning them out so we can get the special summon play of Spinodenia. Most of the time, our summon will be or for Scorpio, because then it can just have the discard send to grab another plant monster onto the field, extending our plays from there. For the spells, running 3 copies of Preda Practice. Special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your hand. Then you can add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for Preda Practice. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon from the extra deck except for fusion monsters. But really, the majority of our cards in our extra deck are fusion monsters, so it's not really a big restriction, with the big play as well being able just to give you that special summon resource from our hand, and then an additional search on top of it. We also run the 1 copy of Predaponics, because this card can once again be a search off of Preda Practice, so we only need the 1 copy. Once per turn, you can special summon a level 4 lower Predaplant monster from your hand or graveyard, but it has its effects negated, but it's mostly just there as an added fusion resource on the field. The 2 copies of Preda Prime Fusion being another Predap search off of Preda Practice. If a Predaplant monster is on the field, fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field as material. So once again, just a makeshift monster, including 2 or more dark monsters you control. You can only activate 1 Preda Prime Fusion per turn, but if you're going for those big 3-of fusion counts, including going into our Predaplant Trivial Veritum, as long as we have that Predator counter on our opponent's field, or they have a dark attribute monster, we can make this monster using this spell. And also the 1 copy of Preda Pruning, sort of like a premature burial summon on the field, and the 1 copy of Predaplast for additional use of the Predap cards in our hand to target an equal number of face-up monsters our opponent controls and place Predator counters on them. Other fusion cards in the deck. Now, I don't know where my playset of Super Polymerization got off to, but I do want to run 3, as long as we can run 3 in the deck, so this is where that spot would be. I have Fusion substituted in here just for the fact that we're only running 1 additional Polymerization, for the fact that we have other better fusion options in the deck, and also for the fact that Polymerization is searchable with Darling Tanya Cobra. And for those plays, 1 Polymerization, 1 Ultra Polymerization, and the 1 Greater Polymerization, all great fusion options to run, but just a 1-of count for these cards in the deck, with the last of our spells being 1 copy of Instant Fusion, and also the 1 copy of Call by the Grave. The Instant Fusion can target our Melodies for another fusion monster on the field, to then use to get into our bigger fusion plays also. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I have the 2 copies of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, just as one of the easier fusion monsters to make, whether we use it for a super polymerization target of our opponent's dark monsters they have on our field, or our own Predaplant monsters, and then the bigger boss monster making use of the attack gain of special summon monsters on our opponent's field. The 2 copies of Dragostapelia for the monster effect negation that this card can provide, as as well. And then also being able to have the search power with Predaplant and Bill Melodies. For when this card is fusion summoned, you can add one Predaplant monster or one Predap spell trap from your deck, graveyard, or face up in the extract to your hand. So search power for anything else we need. So once again, that's why instant fusion just going into this not only gives us a fusion resource on the field, but also an additional search on top of it. And then also the one copy of Predaplant Turvo Veritum, the one copy of Chimera Felicia, and the one copy of Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon. If you wanted to add Predapower Fusion, which is the latest one from Dimension Force, you could just take out the Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon for that fusion source. I would say it's the better evolved form. I just didn't have a copy to add into the deck. With the other generic fusions for the Super Polymerization being the one Mud Dragon and the one Garura additionally, with our only Link monsters in the deck being the one copy of Relinquish Anima, the one Nightmare Cerberus, the one IP Masquerena, and the one Nightmare Unicorn. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, being a big fusion-focused deck, if you have your Predaplant scales, you can set them both up with your Bifulcula and your Triantis. Now, if you have additional Predaplants in your hand, you could go for the Pendulum play beforehand, summoning out this card as a Pendulum summon, then use your Orpher Scorpio's play to send one monster from your hand to the graveyard. So depending on the monster you send, you could grab your additional search for your Darlington Cobra, using Cobra, when special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, to add your fusion spell of choice. And then from there, you can use the Bifulcula in the Triantis play to summon out your fusion monster onto the field, using the Bifulcula to then add one Face of Dark Pendulum from your extract. So you can add the Triantis back to your hand. Triantis effect will also place a Predator counter on your opponent's field. You have the fusion search still from the Polymerization, so then you can use the Polymerization with the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon that you have on the field, and then go either for a bigger fusion play into your Dragostapelia, or you could summon out, since you have a Predaplant monster, a Chimera Felicia, or use all three of the monsters on the field to give you your Turvo Veritum resource also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, I always like updating this deck. It's definitely a fun fusion deck, and one used by Yuri from the Arc 5 anime, who is also a big fan favorite character. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.